Hello and welcome to Driver's Therapy. Today we're going to be repairing this ECU for my 1994 Toyota Supra. This ECU has a couple of leaking capacitors which caused me some intermittent issues and a lot of gremlins, a lot of starting issues. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start. First thing we're going to do is we're going to remove this top cover and we're going to remove this bracket. Underneath this top cover, there's kind of a gasket. It's kind of a gooey stuff. And what you want to do is you want to heat this up, get this heated up so when you try to pry off this cover, the top and bottom cover off, it doesn't give you a lot of issues and you don't damage this. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into it. We're not going to remove the screws from the other side. And now we're going to be removing the bottom cover. We're going to go ahead and take off the top circuit board screws, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the bottom cover on just so it could rest on something. And now we're going to remove these 6 screws and we're going to put them in our baggie. At this point, I'm going to put on gloves, and the reason why is that naturally hands have oils, and you just don't want to place that on the circuit board. You want to try to keep as a clean environment as you can. At this time, we're going to lift up this circuit board and we're going to do it gently because this circuit board is connected to the bottom circuit board via an electrical ribbon. An electrical ribbon is a ribbon that has a little bit of flexibility, but in this situation, it is just soldered on there. Some ribbons do allow you to take them on and off, but this one looks like it's soldered on there. So what we're going to do is we're going to place a small flathead. We're going to put this in one of the screw holes, and we're just going to gently rest the ECU on here. And now we could go ahead and inspect our circuit boards and identify the leaking capacitors. If you look at this capacitor right here at its little legs on the left one, you see how it's brown and kind of looks rusted? That's an indication that it leaked. Also, sometimes they blow up and you'll see kind of like a plus sign where it kind of like opened up. And essentially, they just leak. They just get old. There's also different signs too. I think it could look like hot glue, or it could just look like it's distorted. Luckily on ours, another thing you want to inspect is if it leaked really badly on the circuit board, and our circuit board looks pretty good. But that's how a leaking capacitor is. We've identified it, so let's go ahead and replace it. So now we're going to be replacing the capacitor, but before we start that, we need to talk about our tools and the process. So one of the first things you need to do is you need to identify the capacitor itself. And a way that we did that is by lifting up, and when you remove the bottom cover and you get access to the bottom, you're able to see the back side of the circuit board that we need to work on. So sometimes they're numbered, but essentially what I did is I looked where the capacitor is at, I flipped it over, and I found it where it's supposed to be at on the circuit board in the back itself. So you want to make sure that you do get that correct. So in this type of video, what I wanted to do was I wanted to do one capacitor off camera first to see how it went, and actually learned a lot. So I want to give you guys a quick prelude and make sure you guys understand that I really think that this type of job is for somebody who's experienced with a soldering iron. You don't have to be like an extreme professional, but I would have to say you have to understand soldering, desoldering, flux, you know, the unfluxed desoldering braid, a solder sucker. So essentially you have to have some experience. I recommend, if you want to take this task on, find an old piece of electronics, like an old circuit board, and just practice removing components before you get onto something like this, an expensive and kind of rare ECU out there now. So essentially what happened with me is I put too much heat on one of the legs, and one of the pads essentially came off. And what that means is that there's this kind of like a little contact here. I'll try to get a closer picture and plug it into the video. But essentially, if you overheat it, it comes right off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, you know, fix that later off camera. But I did learn how I made that mistake, and we're going to be showing you how to do it and avoiding that mistake and doing everything right on the next capacitor. So I think it's really important for you guys to learn from my mistake that this does require some learning and understanding of a soldering iron. So let's go ahead and begin with doing a whole capacitor on camera. So the first thing I'm going to do is, of course, a regular Q-tip just starts falling apart. So we have a makeup Q-tip, and it should kind of stay a little bit together. You know, not the most ideal thing. I'm sure like a brush would be better, but I'm gonna get some flux, and I'm gonna apply this flux on the area that I'm at. Not too much. I've seen some videos that they just glob it on there, but I just kind of wanna put some on the area that I'm gonna be working on right there. And then I set the soldering iron to almost 400 degrees Celsius, and it's good to go. And at this point in time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some flux on this as well, and I'm going to tin it. So let me go ahead and get some solder, and I'm going to just lightly tin it just to make it a... There we go. And at this point in time, we're going to do two methods. We're going to do the solder sucker method, and essentially you press this down. And I recently learned that this is designed to take some heat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply some heat on here, and then I'm going to suck it up. So I'm going to put this here, apply it, and suck it. I think I got some more on that. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and do the other side the same way, but this time we're going to be using the braid, so you can see two methods. And one of the things that I made a mistake on the first side was I didn't use a lot of flux, and flux is the key to everything. All right, so what I'm going to do is I put some flux in there. Now I'm going to put the braided copper braid on here to suck up the solder. So let's see if it works. Okay, so I can actually feel that. So there is some solder on there. So our first attempt was, it pulled off a little bit, but not a lot. The goal is you don't want to put your soldering iron there for too long. So let's go ahead. I've added a little more flux, and let's see if we could. Whew, I could feel that heat transfer to my fingers. So that really didn't take off a lot. So let's go ahead and switch. So we tried the solder braid, and it really didn't do well. The solder sucker really worked out. So I'm going to go back to that. And again, I want to be as quick as possible. And I got some more. Let's see if we could get a little bit more. Okay, that at this point the little legs here are kind of at an angle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat it up and try to get these legs straight. That one was perfect. Did you see that? Oh man. Okay, so at this point, I think we got a lot of the solder off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some flux again. And I kind of straightened out the legs as best as I can. Now, it's a fine balance between not leaving the soldering iron too long but at the same time trying to do everything at once. So it's definitely tricky. Now I've got to reach around, which is even trickier because there's like one of these little funky caps here. And I got a hold of the capacitor in the back gently. I'm going to try to heat it up and pull. Okay, now I'm going to try to attack it from the top just real quickly. I'm going to just try to heat up the leg and push out. It's got a bad smell. So at this point, I'm just kind of pulling on it, but I think we got one leg off. Just like the other one of the legs just came right off, which is nice. But we have one leg that's in there. But this is a good time where you guys could see where it kind of leaked inside there. There's a lot of stuff here from the capacitor leaking. That's all that capacitor leakage right there. So I got a leg and I'm slowly pulling this leg out. I'm going to try to heat up the leg just a little bit, see what happens. Okay, so as you see, remove the two capacitors, and both of them, the legs came off. And what's funny is that it was both the positive side of the legs got broken off. So essentially, I had to heat it up and slowly move the legs that were stuck in the board back and forth and pull them out. At this point, we're going to clean up the board. What I'm using is I'm going to use some alcohol. You know, to clean up some flux, clean up some of that gunk on there. But here I have a very solid Q-tip for makeup, and I've got some alcohol in here, and I'm just gonna go around the areas and just pick up stuff. You see how it's picking up stuff right there? I'm gonna come around here. We're gonna that's all we're doing. We're just cleaning up our area. You know, the main thing is we don't want to leave behind any of that cotton in there. Just like I did. Look at that, just like that. But luckily, it stayed on there. Okay, so now we've cleaned it up. Let's go ahead and clean up the backside. And again, this is doable. If you have soldering experience, you could do this. If not, please practice on a circuit board before you do it on your ECU. So it's now time to replace the capacitors. There's a couple things you want to make sure before you go ahead and replace a capacitor. The first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that they're the proper rating, that they're matching with the one that you're replacing. So the one that we removed is 10 microfarads and 50 volts. And the one that we have is also 50 volts and 10 microfarads. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but you guys know what I mean. Second thing you want to make sure is you know which side they are. So these are polarized, and if you look, there's a stripe right here. So it looks like it's a 0. This also has like a stripe and it has this kind of a 0 looking thing. That's going to be your negative side. So let's go ahead and put this in here and show you how it's done. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do to replace the capacitor is we're going to go ahead and put some flux on the leads, and all I'm going to do is just kind of stab it. Bloop. And then I'm going to go ahead, get a little bit of flux on my soldering iron, I'm going to tin my soldering iron. And I'm going to lightly, just real quickly, tin the leads. Just like that. Okay. Then I'm going to make sure I install the capacitor at the correct polarization. I'm going to put my headlamp on so I can see myself. And I have the stripe here, and there's a minus sign on the board right here. I'm going to go ahead and stick this in here if I can. I think these might have to be spread out just a tiny bit. There you go. Now at this point in time, I'm just going to see if I can wiggle them in there. I'm trying not to force them in there because you know what happens when you force stuff. You just don't like it. Let's see what's happening on this side. Okay, as you can see here, we have some looks like we have some legs sticking out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to gently push them in. Push out. Because I want to make sure that it's seated. I feel like these are a little bit too long. So what we're going to do is we're going to just snip them. That was good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to gently lay this one this way. Down right on the board. I don't want it too close to that trace right there. I think that looks amazing in my opinion. We're going to do the same thing with this one. Alright, we don't want it too close to the trace. Okay, so if you could see, that actually looks really nice. So it's touching the pads, it's laying down, and at this point in time what we're going to do is we're going to add flux because it is time to solder. All right. Okay, at this point we're going to be soldering, so I'm going to flux my, get some solder right here, and this should happen really quickly. So we're simply going to transfer the solder from this to this, and that's it. That's it right there. That's not bad for government work. Woo, look at that. Look at that. I'm actually quite proud. Quite proud. You know what? That one took it, and I've learned something in life. You just leave it alone. So those are our solders. That looks fantastic, guys. So the last thing I did was just cleaned up. I used some alcohol to clean up around in the board, to clean up some of that flux, and picked up any of that cotton stuff from the Q-tips. But overall, I am happy with our solder and our capacitor install. I'm going to go get this little pad replaced and get that one finished up. But the main goal was to show you guys how to replace a capacitor, and we did it. So I hope you guys learned something. This was definitely a learning experience for me. And if you have any questions, let me know. And if you have any suggestions or comments, please leave them below. And again, thanks for watching. You guys stay safe, stay tuned, and we will talk to you soon.